Welcome to Doctors of the Baobab. On this podcast, we go beyond the white coat to get to know the doctors that we admire and respect. So join us as we explore the stories behind the stethoscopes, uncovering the humanity behind the medical expertise. And on today's episode of Doctors of the Baobab, I'm honored to have the extraordinary Dr. Abofele Khoele, a visionary leader at the intersection of medicine, business, and impact. As the managing director, he has shown demonstrable leadership dedicated to advancing women's healthcare in South Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. Dr. Khoele has redefined the healthcare landscape with his dynamic leadership and passion for transformative solutions. A former surgeon who has now turned trailblazer in the industry, he brings more than 25 years of experience in high impact leadership, having assumed roles such as managing director, vice president and commercial head of sub-Saharan Africa, group medical executive, and chief scientific officer at prominent generics and multinational companies. Dr. Khoele's academic foundation is as impressive as his career. He holds an MBCHB as well as an MBA from the prestigious University of Cape Town. He is a powerhouse combination of clinical expertise and business acumen. He brings a track record of innovation, resilience, and a deep commitment to health equity. Dr. Khoele is not just leading, he's inspiring the next generation of change makers, currently on sabbatical since February 2024.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Dr. Nontumiso.
Thank you for joining us. And normally on the podcast, we start at the beginning. We look at your childhood, where we were born, and we're still going to go there. But I'm very curious, as we talked beforehand, that you are currently on a break, right? You are on a sabbatical after spending so many years in these amazing, powerful roles and transformative roles. Tell me a little bit more about sabbatical. How did you get to deciding that you want to take a sabbatical?
Yeah, well, it was a decision that was partly forced upon me. After 25 years of working hard, it was a very nice checkpoint to look back at my life, my career, and then also look forward at what comes next. So it was exactly 25 years since I qualified as a medical doctor, and I thought it was a nice point to pause. But at the same time, I had a quite life-changing medical illness in the last year as well. I had zoster of my eye, which impacted my face, my vision. I was blind for a few weeks. And you know what? There's nothing to cause you to reflect than when, you can't see anything and you have to look inside. And in those few weeks, I looked upon, the legacy that I want to leave behind, particularly for my family. And I realized that, having worked hard for 25 years, I didn't spend much time with my family. And maybe if I dedicated at least a year of my life to spending with my family, rediscovering those connections, then I'll be able to set myself up for the coming part of my career. And so for this year, I decided to take a step back, focus on my family, focus on myself and my health. And it's been an amazing journey. Of course, the first couple of weeks were filled with anxiety because I've been used to doing something for the last 25 years. But once, you come to peace with that, then it just opens up my mind. It opened up my mind to what the possibilities are going forward. And of course, being able to go and pick up my son from school, do homework with him, see him at bedtime also, is very fulfilling. So it's been a great year. I've discovered new hobbies, new skills around the house and outside, and planning the next phase of my career. So it's been a really good 10 months. It ends hopefully in February, so I've given myself a year, and let's see what the next chapter holds.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to spend a little bit more time around the sabbatical because, as you know, This is a very topical conversation in the medical community, and many might feel that you taking a break really at the height of your profession. Why not just push forward, to the next rung? Tell me about your mindset. How has that changed for somebody else maybe that's listening and been there, maybe that's just starting out and was looking at you. You were a medical director, you were vice president, you were managing director of huge organizations, successful by all accounts. Somebody watching and thinking, that's not what I had in mind, that at some point I might take a break. Tell me about how your mindset has shifted since you decided to go on sabbatical.
Yeah. So I think for many of us, we leave school and we go straight into, tertiary education. And then from there, first straight into our jobs, right? And especially as doctors, you spend 6 years at medical school, followed by internship, community service, if applicable. And then you're off into a clinical career without actually taking a break or a breath to recognize whether this is where you want to be, right? And you're forced into, a registrar or resident role, you're a consultant. Now you have to work hard to support your family. And we never take a break to reflect exactly what it is that we want and what is best for our family and ourselves for fulfillment. And so, for me, I got into medicine. I had a really rough time initially in terms of balancing my life and my career. Made the switch to pharma, and as you know, and probably an A-type driven personality, the focus is on moving up the ladder. And we never stop to think whether it is really what you want. And I moved from medical advisor to chief scientific officer to group executive, vice president, managing director. And at the end of it all, right, we could keep going because, the wheel keeps turning. But ultimately, unless you take a step back and have a look at the landscape, you won't realize what it is that you want and what more you can actually offer. And I really do think that this year has given me a tremendous insight into myself and what it is that I can actually add value to society and to any organization that I might join in the future, and also how I approach my career, right? In terms of then having that balance with what I'm doing versus what my family needs and what I want as well. And certainly, I think the next phase of my career, I'm going to approach very, very differently. And I do think that if I hadn't taken this break to reflect, I would have just continued to do what I was doing before at the detriment of myself and my family, my personal life. So I really do think that, for anyone, a mid-career sabbatical, be it 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, is an absolute necessity just to reflect on oneself and one's needs, as well as the needs of those closest to you.
Mm-hmm. What has been the takeaway from this period, the biggest takeaway so far from this period that you will be taking into your next role?
Yeah. So I think for my next role, my biggest takeaway from this time is really to realize that I am the most important person in my career, right? Not the organization that I work for, not anyone else that may be associated with me, right? And I need to take care of me before I can fulfill anyone else's dreams because I've got myself and my family that are depending on me. So it's critically important as clinicians, as doctors in corporate, that we realize that our well-being is of the utmost importance, and not just physical, but also mental and emotional. And like I said, one of the things that caused me to, put the brakes on and take this year off was the fact that I had a serious medical illness that caused me to put a stop. And it could have been a heart attack, it could have been a stroke, right? I was very fortunate that it was just a zoster infection, but certainly it was stress related. And so that is my one key takeaway that, without your well being, you are nothing to anybody. And you must guard that as selfishly as possible.
I love that. I love that insight. I want to ask you if you believe that our medical training contributes to that at all, as some might argue that we are trained to be very stoic. We are trained not to say no, especially in as far as healthcare is involved. We're always the first people to be on the front lines, and we just keep going. That is the culture of medicine. Would you agree with that? And if you could have it your way, how could you change our training to allow us a little bit of grace to say, I've come as far as I can. I need to take a break. I need to take a rest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our training really needs some help in broadening and rounding off the personalities that go through the training, right? And for starters, it attracts a particular type of personality. All the people coming to medical school are top performers in their academic records, etc. And so, throughout your career, you're driven to constantly perform and do better. And that is, as much as it's a great thing for the frontiers of medical science, it can be detrimental to the person, right? Because you don't give yourself grace, you don't give yourself a break. Second thing is, in terms of the training itself, you're quite right. You're taught to, it's almost quite regimental, right? You're taught to, do things a particular way. You have to be there at the front line. You have to do a 24-hour call. And as much as during internship or during your residency, you may not enjoy it and you hate it, as soon as you become a consultant, you are the one that then does the same thing to the next generation. And so it's a vicious cycle that, one generation of healthcare providers, of doctors, then take out their frustrations and their experiences on the next generation. But certainly the training really needs to be broadened to include a lot more of the social sciences, I think. Yes, it is a scientific area, but I think, it's also a very human sector that demands a lot of art to it as well. So I think exposure to the social sciences is critically important. And of course, all the other things that we're not exposed to, whether it's legal or financial, that help you run your life and your business, that also adds stress when you don't do it right, right? So that as well, but certainly exposure to some of the softer skills would be really, really great.
Very interesting. And now I wanted to just talk about the issue of your family and how you've talked about the importance of spending time with your family in terms of your own fulfillment. Can you talk a little bit more about your support structure and how that has been? Has your family been part of that?
Yeah, my family has been incredibly supportive right from my early days to today. I'm fortunate that I've got a very close knit family that lives not too far away geographically from where I am. So I get to see them quite often. It was tough for a few years when I lived in Dar es Salaam and in Nairobi and in Cape Town when they weren't close. But certainly my nuclear family is very close. My partner is also a physician, an oncologist, so understands the kind of work that doctors do, but also makes it difficult when both of you are busy professionals required to spend time. So we've had to be, very deliberate in terms of making time for our son and each other. We have, frequent weekends away, dinners always are on the table for the three of us. So there's definitely family time that we dedicate. But yeah, I mean, it's unless you are very deliberate about it, it can run away from you as just two busy professionals. As I said, I'm fortunate that my mom and my brother are also in Johannesburg, get to see them regularly. And yeah, it's important to also, those family traditions and family occasions are spent together to just recharge and reconnect. So I've been very fortunate in that.
Right. And so for somebody that is still in the corporate world and maybe less restricted to the corporate world, because I know that dynamics might be slightly different in other settings, but for somebody who's still there, who still has ambitions to follow a similar career trajectory to yourself, what are the practical insights and steps and practices perhaps that you can share with them? You've shared, making sure that you're intentional about time with the family. What else can they do in terms of managing their time to get to a point that they can still find fulfillment in their work without feeling burnt out or compromising their family time?
Yeah. I think another thing is to be very clear in your communication, both at home and at work. In terms of where the boundaries are, right? So if you are strictly sticking to an 8 or 10 hour day, be clear at work that please do not call me after 6 p.m. at night because that's my family time. Or I'll be back online at 10 p.m. But between 5 and 10, that's my family time. And be very clear about that, that the weekends are yours. And let's communicate and everyone must know. And certainly do the same at home that, some days I'll be at work for 8 hours, you know, that's just the way it is. Please do not call me at 2:30 and ask me to pick up, the boy from school because I won't be around. And once you have that clarity of communication, I think, the boundaries are set and you yourself shouldn't be crossing those boundaries, right? Don't allow others to do so. So I think those are the two most important things, making that time and then setting the boundaries, and everything else should ideally follow, but it has to be deliberate. Otherwise life takes over. And before you know it, it's just swallowed you up.
So definitely guarding selfishly the time that we put aside for our own rejuvenation and to re-energize ourselves. Yeah. You mentioned also about your nuclear family, being close to your nuclear family. I'm curious about your background, your upbringing, and how those early experiences shaped your approach to life in general, but how at all they influenced your decision to enter a career in medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up in Soweto. I was born in Deep Kloof Clinic. Grew up in Soweto in the mid 80s, when Soweto was really on fire. And I think that experience really shaped my view on social justice, which I think much later on in life also then shaped my attraction to equity, especially in the healthcare space. Growing up in Soweto when the apartheid riots were at their peak, seeing the injustices that were happening, seeing the violent protests. Yeah, so that was how I spent my teens. Finished high school, went to UCT to study medicine, and yeah, the rest is history, right? But in terms of my childhood, I think had a very happy childhood despite what is going on, in the society around myself with mother, father, brother, and a sister. In Soweto, very happy and typical, I suppose, black middle class at the time. My mom was a nurse. My dad worked in insurance. And yeah, we had a pretty comfortable life by those standards.
And that is interesting because often people assume that if well, firstly, there was no middle class during apartheid, which is not true. There was a robust black middle class during apartheid. But also, people assume that if you grew up in that type of environment, in a middle class environment, you don't care much about issues of justice and social equity. How have you carried that lens into your career in terms of your life as a doctor? What is it that you've seen that you felt that you needed to address because you carried that lens? Yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I think it started out during my community service. I was posted out to a place called Galetspan, which is out in the northwest. If there's a place in South Africa that's literally in the middle of nowhere, that was it. It is literally a hospital surrounded by farms, not villages. And the closest villages were 30, 40, 50 kilometers away, but had a drainage of about 200,000 people. So it was a fairly big district hospital, but without any other residential area around it, which was weird for me. So there was no social life besides the 10 doctors that I worked with, you know. So in that environment, we'd go to do clinics on a daily basis to these villages, so drive 40 Ks using 4x4s to do day clinics. And that is where I think I first saw the impact of healthcare on the social system in South Africa, right? My internship, I did at Joburg Gen, which was strictly tertiary care. You did what you did to a person and that was it. But when you go into a clinic and you're seeing someone come to you with a disability form because they have a minor ailment, but they need money. And you as a doctor have to make a decision on whether this person is going to die of hunger or you are, going to complete this form. You know, at that level again, you're seeing people come with having been abused by their uncles, and they're brought to the clinic by their uncle, and you have to, maneuver around this very sensitive topic with the perpetrator sitting there. It's for me, it was heart wrenching to see that at the real grassroots level, the ground level, doctors have to be everything, right? We're lawyers, we were doctors, we were nurses, we were social workers. And that one visit a week, people would look forward to because there's one time they get to see a professional. And it really made a big impression on me that, many of us don't want to go to rural areas to work. And for me, that 1 year's experience was, you know, very impactful in the rest of my career and how it eventually turned out. And so then I then did a stint in the UK where I practiced very different medicine. In fact, I started with my postgraduate surgical education there, where it was incredibly different. Came back to Barra, and again a different experience where it was so overwhelming, And surgery in a hospital, biggest hospital in South Africa, is something to behold. And I really do think that if I was not burnt out, I was very close to burnout at that point, where I was working every single day for 9 solid months, Saturdays, Sundays included. sometimes up to 72 hours at a time. And it was really heavy. And I had to make a decision on whether I wanted to continue pursuing my surgical love or, you know, pursue a family social life. And I opted for the latter. And that's when I made the change, right? But I also made the change in terms of, I mean, I could have gone anywhere in terms of changing my career. But I selected pharmaceuticals in particular because I felt that while in a clinical setting, you're able to affect one patient at a time. In an organization that is, focused on healthcare, you can impact many lives at a time. And so I went into pharmaceuticals, and I was mainly in the scientific areas of medical affairs and clinical research. And again, you sit there, even at senior management level, you realize that as much as you are part of the leadership team, the guys that are making the decisions are the guys with the money. So it's on the commercial side, right? And I thought, you know what, I don't want to be part of rubber stamping a decision. I want to be a decision maker. And it was at that point that I decided to transition from the scientific side to then the commercial side. And I think that's again where I was a transformative journey for me. And again, in terms of making decisions, I could then direct where resources went. I could direct where we make investments that would most impact people in the best possible way. And, being a healthcare professional, I actually do believe that those decisions are very different to the type of decision that an accountant would have made in the same position. And yeah, so I really do feel that, you know, having grown up in that environment, and having had the journey that I've had has really had an impact on the decisions that I've made in the clinical, in the scientific, as well as in the commercial space. And of course, when I transitioned to become managing director of Organon, which had an amazing purpose of, empowering and transforming healthcare for women across the African continent. Again, that gave me another breath of a second wind, basically, to just chase this purpose. And I think, in the time that I was there, we did incredibly well at, setting up a platform to transform the lives of women and to bring equity in healthcare and in society across the African continent.
Oh, that sounds amazing. But I want to suggest that perhaps you didn't do it alone. You've talked about the role of your family. And my assumption is that there have been people along the path who have mentored you or coached you. Would that be accurate?
That would be very, very accurate. I don't think that in any successful professional career, you can do it without acolytes. There has to be someone who speaks for you when you are not there, someone who helps you along, someone who advises you. And along my journey, there have been a number of people that have been really good to me without even me asking. And I've been very blessed to have those people in my life.
So give me your thoughts around mentorship and the importance of mentorship in the medical profession. Are you a mentor yourself? Do you mentor other people?
Yeah.
Just your thoughts, please, around mentorship.
Yeah. So this year, part of my time I've actually dedicated to mentoring professionals at varying levels of their career. So there are some who are starting out, there are some mid-level professionals, and some senior executives that I'm currently mentoring. And I really do think mentorship is one of the critical things that many organizations and many people miss out on, because you get to learn vicariously from the lives of other people. You get to have a soundboard about what you a soundboard for what you're thinking, and really, some things, some ideas, you know form themselves once you start talking about them. So mentorship for me, both as a mentee and as a mentor, has been something that has really been of great benefit, because even as a mentor, you learn a lot more than from your mentee than if you were just set in a corner by yourself. So it's a two-way stream. And yeah, it's been incredible, and I really do recommend it to anyone who is not currently in a mentor mentee relationship, to actually find a mentor that can actually raise their game, but at the same time put themselves out there to be mentors to someone else.
And during the course of your career and your experiences and exposure around mentorship, what are the have you discovered any aspects about yourself that you weren't aware of before that have influenced your life choices?
Yeah, many. So I mean, as a mentee in my early days, in my early on in my career. I had wonderful mentors, both locally, and I was fortunate enough to have a senior international mentor that guided me in my early in my career. And being from a clinical background, coming fresh into corporate, of course, there's a lot I didn't know about corporate. But also a lot that I know about myself that impacted my career in corporate. So, I mean, things like, as a doctor, it's hard to say no, right? If a patient comes in, you have to treat them. But in a setting, some things you have to say no to. Otherwise, you'll be at the office, for 24 hours a day. So, I mean, one of some of those things in terms of, again, I said earlier, setting boundaries, and not accepting everything that comes, and not accepting everything as truth. In as I said, in clinical practice, a patient comes and tells you, "I've got a pain here." You believe it, right? You don't second guess it. But in a corporate setting, you have to second guess everything that comes across your desk. You have to, interrogate everything thoroughly. Have to read every document to make sure that it is as accurate as can be. So some of those things I had to learn quite early on in terms of corporate setting and about myself. And as I moved on, I learned a lot about leadership. And when I got into my first management role, I had to learn to be a leader. Again, not something that you learn in the clinical setting. Yes, and it's funny because doctors are often the leaders of clinical teams, but there is no leadership training whatsoever at medical school or after that. So when I got into a management role and had to learn how to lead and the important traits of leader and what aspects of my personality can improve my leadership and what aspects actually drag down my leadership skills, and going through all of that assessment and analysis and then trying to then change some of those aspects was another journey that was quite interesting that my mentor helped me with. And then as I became more senior, I started having mentees. And again, from them, I learned a lot about being a leader and how, you're perceived as a leader. I think, as much, and I happened to be quite a young director at the time. I think I was 32 when I got my first directorship. And when you are that young, you really don't feel like you are a big person in the organization, but because you hold the title, you're perceived as being someone else, right? And trying to bridge that gap now between the perception and the person is something that I learned through my mentee, because my mentee was, funny enough, was I think 29 and I was 32. But again, there was this gap that needed to be bridged between us, despite the closeness in age. But that was because of the title, and that again helped me as I moved further on in my career. That the title holds a lot of weight, but as an individual, you need to bridge the gap to talk to the person rather than for them to talk to a title. And those are some of the things that I learned, in my mentee mentor relationships, both ways.
Yeah. Wow. That is very, very profound. I love the way that you talked about bridging the gap between who you are and the title, but also what you've emphasized that you want people in your team and the people that you lead to talk to you and not to the title. I think there's a great insight and very useful way and mindset actually of approaching leadership. While we're still on the topic of leadership, resilience is obviously a very crucial part of being a good leader, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector. Very familiar with some of the dynamics there myself. How do you build and maintain resilience when you talk to your mentors? How do you cultivate it in their lives? How can they do it for themselves, but also for people that they lead?
Yeah. So I think an important part of resilience is the home base, right? You need to have a stable and supportive home structure to have any form of resilience in the workplace. Cannot have chaos at work and at home. And I really do encourage the people that I work with to do whatever it takes to make sure that they're happy in their home environment. And by that, it's not just the relationship between them and their partners and their kids, but also in terms of the way their home looks, in terms of how they're furnished. They must be happy to be at home, spend time at home with the people they're with in the nice environment. And that is one way I encourage them that, that's important because that is forms the basis of anything else that you want to do at work. And if anything happens at work, at least you do know that you've got a safe haven to go back to and to recharge. So that's critically important that, the home front has to be secured before you can even talk resilience at work. The
Mm,
second thing,
mm.
uh, at home, at work, you need to form strong networks. that'll help you become resilient, right? And the networks are not just to help you move up in the organization. They're not just there to share information and gossip, but certainly make sure you choose the right people that are going to be supportive and are going to build your career. And the third thing I think is to have a very good relationship with your manager and your subordinates if you have any. You know, having a good relationship with your manager will shield you from a lot of things that are coming from above. When you have a good relationship with the manager, a good understanding, and they will do their utmost to ensure that you have a good working environment. And similarly, you have to do the same for your subordinates in terms of shielding them from anything, any pressure that's coming from the top. But at the same time, they will do whatever they can to make sure that they you look good, right? They need to support you to make sure that you are successful as their leader. So it is on both fronts. You need to make sure that, the manager is happy, you have a good relationship, but at the same time, your subordinates are well taken care of because they're the ones that will support you in the end.
Yes, very practical once again, and something that is often underrated is having a good relationship with your manager and understanding the doors that they can open for you just by having a good relationship with them. Another rookie mistake many people make is not fostering and working on the relationship with your manager because they don't understand that very notion that your manager can actually make things happen for you and protect you, as you've said. But I like that you've also the responsibility that we have to do the same for people that we lead. What does success look like for you?
Success is, for me, a happy family and a fulfilling career that's congruent with my values. Um, you know, we're all looking for that one purpose in life, right? Or the purposes in life. But it's very rare that people find that purpose. But as long as you are in a fulfilling career and your family's happy, for me, that's what success looks like.
And few years from now, maybe many years from now, because they say doctors don't retire, you will look back and maybe we'll reconnect on another podcast. And I will ask you, what has been your legacy? What would you say?
Um, I still want to leave an impact on women's health on the continent. It's this journey that I started on in 2020 that I'm still currently actively involved in. I think there's a big need for the support of women's health across the continent, for the support of gender equity, and if there's one thing that I would love to leave behind, is that. And we started, as the work that we did at Organon. Then we started the Coalition on Women's Health, which is a network supported primarily by Organon, but a number of other pharmaceutical and device manufacturers, and has grown to now include a number of non-governmental organizations as well as multilateral institutions. So it's a growing organization that's focused on women's health, addressing the needs. So a group of parties that are pulling their resources together to address a subset of needs for women's health. And we felt that by pulling those resources, we're able to have a bigger impact. And it's the organization is growing from strength to strength. And yeah, I want to continue the work in women's health. I want to continue the work that I started in terms of mentorship. And yeah, let's see in a few years. Hopefully, when we next connect, I will tell you about the impact that we've had in those two areas.
Wonderful. But before we end, I'd love to just give you an opportunity if there's anything that you would want to say or to share with the audience that you think they should know.
Well, the fact is, as a doctor, life's not easy, but we are chosen for this special task and to do it the best way we can. And if we are able to lean on each other, if we're able to draw on people like Dr. Nondo Miso and the podcast and the coaching that is offered, I think we can then better deliver on the service that we are more than capable of doing.
Dr. Abofele Khoele, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so grateful for your time and sharing your insights and especially sharing your wisdom. So at this point, I'd really like to encourage the audience to reflect on this discussion and everything that you shared and consider how they can also apply the lessons that you shared in their own lives. And that
Thank you very
brings
much.
us to the end, excuse me, that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of Doctors of the Baobab. And I hope you found today's discussion both enlightening and empowering. Before we part ways, I want to extend a heartfelt invitation. If you're a doctor, if you've been inspired by what you've heard today and you're ready to take action, please do connect and see how we can embark on a transformative journey together. So don't forget also to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode filled with valuable insights and strategies for personal growth. And if you know someone who could benefit from today's conversation, please be sure to spread the word and also encourage them to tune in. And let's also stay connected beyond the podcast. You can follow me and the guest on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram. Join the conversation, share your thoughts, connect with like-minded individuals who are also on their journey towards living their best life. Remember, every small step you take towards your goals is a victory worth celebrating. Until next time, keep striving, keep growing, keep shining bright. Doctors of the Baobab, where medicine meets innovation.